Hello.
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 We are officially live for the Sword of Kaigen live chat. Looks like we already have some people on, so that's awesome. So welcome those of you who are watching live, and if you happen to be watching this after the fact, thanks for checking it out. This hopefully is going to be a lot of fun to discuss. So it should be a good review with Sword of Kaigen, but I figure we'll start with having everybody just introduce themselves so we can go clockwise, which is Lawrence, John, Dom, Patrick is what I'm showing here. And just everybody introduce. I would, I guess, hope people know who I am since this is on my channel. If not, I'm Nico and I talk about fantasy books and stuff.
Hi, Nico.
So I'll go first. Hi, I'm Lawrence from the channel Reading with Lawrence, and I do fantasy, romance book, and recently more thrillers book as well. So I do pretty much like everything.
Hi, I'm John. My channel is Walker Wright 7, and I'm a self-published author, artist, and I have a book channel where I talk about YA and adult fantasy.
Hi, I'm Dom. My channel is Dominish Books. I predominantly talk about fantasy, but with the occasional bit of sci-fi thrown in as well, which I've not actually done any sci-fi on the channel, so that's coming up soon, I think.
Hey, I'm Patrick.
Nice.
My channel name is just Patrick Bryan, and I mainly talk about fantasy and nonfiction.
See, we even have a nonfiction. That's a pretty wide variety there to go in. So it's always good to have the different thoughts too. So especially for a book discussion, having people who read different things, I think is awesome. So, well, the first thing is just, I think, what's everybody's general reaction here to the book? We'll start non-spoiler. I think we're going to get spoiler pretty quick. But just for like a general reaction for whoever wants to go first on the book.
Should I go first? Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
I really like the book. I read it twice now. So I read it for my book club 2 months ago, and then when I saw that you were doing it this month, and you had space for the live show, I wanted to participate as well. And so I reread it a second time. I just finished like yesterday night, and it's like 4.5 stars both time. I loved it up until the last chapter. So we'll talk about that later, but I love pretty much everything of the book.
That's some dedication right there, rereading it again like that for the live show. Appreciate it.
The first time I read it physically, and then this time I read it as an audiobook. So it went a little bit quicker.
Oh, I gotcha.
But yeah.
I did Kindle. That's why I'm sad I can't hold up my book like I was telling you earlier before the show. I wanted to hold it up, but it's on my Kindle. And my Kindle isn't even... Am I the only one? Wow, okay. You guys are making me look bad. I'm going to kick all of you from the stream.
I'll go next. I really liked it. It's like one of my favorite books of the year now. I just enjoyed all the emotional beats. I enjoyed how she integrated powers. It wasn't just as simple as like I can throw water and ice. It's like it actually affected how they live and how they act and their personalities. And then I really liked how it was really rare how the climax happens right in the middle, and it doesn't really get more intense from there. It's just all falling action. So it's just really unique, and I loved all the characters. So really amazing book for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was a really weird thing about it with the climax being kind of in the middle. For me, I kind of thought that I might not like it. I'd heard some things that kind of took it out of my kind of taste profile before reading it, but yeah, I was surprised. I really enjoyed it. There were a few things that I didn't like about it, really, but that's kind of normally the way, I guess. You don't get a book that ticks every single box, but yeah.
For sure. Well, I guess we're sticking with clockwise. That wasn't even planned for that one, but Patrick, if you want to go.
Yeah, I gave it 4 stars as well. It was going to be a little bit higher, but with the ending, then like how it finished off, certainly one of the most emotional books I've ever read. And I like how the focus for the book in general wasn't really on the war, the fighting part of it, how it affected everyone afterwards and beforehand.
Yeah.
Unique view.
I agree with pretty much everything that everybody said, brought up different aspects. And I, too, it was a 4 out of 5 for me. And It definitely could have been a 5, but I had some issues too with a few things in there. But yeah, definitely the way it conveyed emotion and with the climax being in the middle is definitely odd, but it did. You had kind of the pre-war and then the post-war, looking at all that and really focusing more on the characters than the war itself. So it definitely had a very interesting take that was quite different. And I didn't really know a ton of information about what it was going to be about at first. So, like, I remember, John, when you first started, you're like, "What? They have technology in this? What's going on?" Too. And I remember
Yeah.
you commenting on that. Like, I wasn't expecting that at all. I was thinking this was going to be much more like distant past. So the setting, I think, was pretty interesting there as well. Oh, I will note. So Stacy also read the ebook, so I'm not alone. And then
Yeah, I
here's
did most of my reading on the ebook, but this was a present. First of all, it was from Patrick, so it was quite nice to read that. And I actually took it outside with me. I never read outside, but I was enjoying this, so I took it along with me when I was out with my daughter one day and did some reading on that. But it was weird actually, because I did notice some differences between the ebook and the physical book in the kind of the italics on some of the dialect, some of the dialogue, which really kind of threw me, because in the ebook I was reading, most of the dialogue was in italics, whereas in the physical book there was only a small portion that was. So,
oh, that's interesting.
I think the italics are just in the past. I think I caught onto that. But also doesn't surprise me the ebook and the physical are formatted differently, because it's kind of a pain in the ass. I know it was self-published. Actually, being self-published myself, it doesn't format the same, so they may have missed that. But also, I think the italic dialogue is only in the past when we're talking about
In the chapters that are in the past.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I thought it was kind of when there's, you've got different dialects that are being used in there, and you've got some people who don't understand one dialect, and I thought it was used to distinguish between that. But on the Kindle, it was difficult to tell that for me, because almost all of it was in italic. So yeah, it's just a little bit weird having that crossover when I switched between versions.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I definitely noticed a lot of italic dialogue, so I didn't realize that was only in the ebook version. So I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, actually, I'm just looking now, and it looks like there's a chapter in the present that also has italics dialogue. So yeah, I have no idea. I kind of just started ignoring the italics.
I did the same. I'm just like, it's dialogue. It's okay.
It's just weird. It's not normal. So
it definitely was different here. So how about we talk about what's the favorite characters? Because I have a feeling there's going to be a couple that we'll hear quite a lot. So curious to see what everyone's. And we don't have to go in order. Anybody who wants to jump in can, for the record.
Are we doing spoilers now, or are we still spoiler free?
We can do spoilers. Is probably fine. We talked for a few minutes, non-spoiler. I figure 90% of this. I did put spoilers in all caps in the title of the YouTube video, so everybody should be pretty well warned about it. So yeah, feel free to talk about. I think
you can really talk about this book without the spoilers.
That's why I figured we'd do a short, but most of it, even talking about why characters are your favorite, I feel like we're already going to be in spoiler territory.
Exactly.
So yeah, so spoilers from here on out. All.
Well, I'll go.
We have Stacy chimed in. I agree.
Yeah, I almost feel like objectively Misaki should kind of be the best or most favorite, because she has the most time to develop a lot. But I just really like Mamoru. Mamoru is my favorite. I think the reason why, and this is a big part of why I like the book so much, is I feel like I've never been able to mourn a character like as I'm reading it. Like a lot of the times when you're reading a book and a character dies, they usually die at the end, so you're sad. And by the time the next book comes around, it's probably been time since you've read that first book. So even though it's still sad, and you're like, oh, you missed that character, there's not really a sense of like mourning. But in this book, like as I was reading it, and after his death at the middle, I kept wanting to like see him. How would he interact with this person? I want to see him, like, how would he do this here? I just felt like we got a lot of sense of his potential and what he could be as a person, and it's just all gone. It's just like he was just wiped from the earth in this like really tragic way. And I just like couldn't get over. I just never stopped missing Mamoru and wishing that he was still alive to do something. So I just really liked his struggle as the like prestigious person, but he wasn't like really perfect. I feel like that was really done well. So he wasn't a perfect character, even though he had such great potential and such great power. And I just like loved how he was like questioning his country and how he decided to fight for his people, not his country. I loved everything about Mamoru. He was my favorite.
I think that everything with his character worked. I found myself just more drawn to Masaki's plotline, and that wasn't knowing that it was going to be pretty much just Masaki for the second half. But even like when Mamoru died, it was sad, but I was hit way harder in like the next couple chapters when Masaki was grieving for him. And so it's like I liked a lot of the other characters, but it's just like Masaki with everything was definitely for me. It looks like in the comments we definitely have some people who feel the same too. I know Narcel, he commented Mamoru was his favorite with reading through too. So
Mamoru is my favorite as well. I loved him from the start. Yeah, I love like right from the beginning, everything he believed in and everything he was taught, like he is put to doubt. And then he never got really the time to process anything because then the battle starts right away. But then like when it counted and when people needed him, he stepped up and he was there for his people. But then everything happened with him. But yeah, he was my favorite too. I had trouble like connecting with Misaki in the beginning. I loved her more in the end, maybe because we were more with her by the end of the book. But in the beginning, I had trouble like connecting with her. Maybe it's, I don't know. I just had more trouble with her in the beginning.
Interesting.
I
Dom,
found
Patrick?
I didn't really like. Well, I wouldn't say I didn't like Mamoru. I liked his storyline, but I didn't really connect to him as a character. But I think his kind of storyline itself, I preferred to Misaki's. But overall, character-wise, it was definitely Misaki for me. And part of that might be, as you say, because kind of the second half of the book was largely just a single person perspective, barring that odd one little bit of a chapter. So I mean, she was a really good character, really well rounded, and just the kind of the depth of emotion that you go into with her, you don't see in a lot of fantasy. So I really liked that.
And her growth as well is something that I really liked, how she changes all throughout the book.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's with not connecting to her early on. I can kind of see that just because she does change a lot. And the way she's presented at first is, I feel like, a lot harder to probably identify with, because I mean she starts talking about how she feels so cold to her children, just like in her husband, and she's presented there, and then you learn why she's that way and kind of see things change. But it's definitely just the changes and the themes explored are pretty unique, I think. So we're 2-2, Patrick. Are you going to break our tie?
Yeah. So I liked Mamoru better. At least
Oh,
the first half, obviously.
Dom, we need you lose, Dom.
So Misaki obviously has more depth to her, but in the beginning of the book, I was always looking forward to his chapter, figuring out what's going on in his story.
And I do think Mamoru too. That would normally be the focus of the story in fantasy. That felt like the fantasy story. Misaki didn't. And that's why, for me, I was surprised by how quickly I was wrapped up with Misaki, because the obvious point of the story is not going to be. And granted, I knew that it was supposed to focus on a mother character to an extent, but like when you're reading fantasy and you have like, oh, it's the young boy in school who's learning to use his power. Like, no, clearly he's the main character, and it wasn't that way. And so that I thought it was just really interesting too, and especially with the middle of the book, that I was not really fully expecting either. So it was interesting.
Speaking of typical like fantasy settings or stories, did anybody catch how their ancestor, the first one who created the Whispering Blade, his story is like beat for beat like the typical fantasy story? It's like a kid who comes from a big family, his whole family is murdered. He's adopted, so he grows up as like a farmhand or like a blacksmith, and then he leaves to go and gain his powers. He gets a special ability, which is the Whispering Blade, and he comes back and like takes over his kingdom again by defeating the person who killed his family. I was just like, oh, there's that story.
Seen that one before.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think about that at all. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that was funny.
I remember that story, but yeah, that is really interesting. That has that kind of archetypal story in there. You were saying that, I'm like, huh, yeah, I didn't really think about that too much. Some things I really thought about, and others I didn't clearly. So we've got in the comments, Stacy says, really liked the introspection with Masaki. Definitely agree. I'm not sure how relevant this one is, but I figured I'd pop that up there too for boiled
Well,
jellyfish.
there's a fisherman village in the book, so
Yeah.
that's kind of relevant. There you
The
go.
ocean does go crazy
There's
around
a
them
lot of,
too
yeah.
with the tornadoes. So I don't think we have any jelly that I remember.
No.
But so
Did,
oh, go ahead.
well, I had a question. Did you guys enjoy the flashback of Misaki's story, like in the beginning, like the first chapter of her flashback? What did you guys think? Yeah, because I'm also I didn't love it. I kind of
I think that
So
was
try to
the main real section of the book that I didn't like, actually. The technology to a degree, but actually most of the technology was in that section as well. Yeah, for me, it really took me away from the rest of the story. So whenever we had those, because I think that first chapter of the flashback was actually quite a long one as well. So by the time we were coming to the end of it, I was just so happy to be back on the mountain.
Yeah, it definitely that was when I kind of talked about in the general reaction point. That was really the whole thing that I didn't like. The flashbacks and the kind of the tie-ins to that other story, which is turns out what it was. It just it had a very, very different feel for me.
Yeah.
And it just like kind of took me out of the story. Actually, in my review, I talked about I feel like if you completely took all of that out and made it like more of a typical fantasy setting without technology or anything, I think like the bulk of the book still completely works. There would only be a few things that would have to change, and at least for me, I would have enjoyed that. But it was the tie-in parts were the things that I just liked the least, especially the very last chapter. I was not a fan of.
Yeah.
Like it did some things well, but it just also didn't feel necessary for me. It felt like I think more of like an epilogue for me.
Yeah, I don't think the part with her in the past, I don't think I minded it when I read it, but I feel like as objectively as you can be about a story, I don't think it should have been done, or at least not in the way it was. Like I didn't mind it, I thought some of it was interesting. I and I don't even feel like, and I can't properly explain why, but I don't even feel like it was necessary for us to have to understand that she had this past as a warrior where, she almost loved this guy and stuff like that. I don't know if that whole thing that was discussed was necessary. So I kind of struggle with saying why it didn't work. I still didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. But I think honestly it just comes down to like that last chapter. I think it just comes down to her tying in her other series. That's the only reason I could think that she's probably did it is to kind of like. I mean, I don't think the last chapter was all bad. There's some stuff we want to talk about it that I did actually like or thought was interesting, but I think it just helped tie it into her original series because her first two books are centered around Daniel. So I think that's why she had to bring back in Daniel and his father, Robin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I like.
No, good. But she's so different. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
She's so different in the flashback, Misaki. Like her character is so different when we see her in the flashback, and then when you come back to her, she's like they're almost two different complete people. So I thought I could see her progression, how she got to being that, because she's so strong in those flashbacks, and she's like a badass woman. It's kind of like a superhero weird thing. But when we see her in the present, she's just so different, and it felt a little bit weird sometimes.
Yeah, and I was like, the part of the flashback, like the kind of the point of them, besides the tie-in, was to kind of show who she was and how she ended up where she is. That part I did think worked in some cases because they're like the scene with her father, for example, I thought was well done.
Yeah.
And there were some other ones like that I did like. It just I agree, it did feel kind of superhero-y, and it just didn't. It was the clash of feel for me. I completely
Clash of
agree.
like themes. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So Stacy says, first didn't connect to Misaki's flashbacks. By the end, was really glad we got it because it added a lot of emotional impact and nuance to her, especially the duel scene. To get a better sense of the emotions she had. She really trusted her family to set her a life, and she really got let down. So yeah, that actually ties in perfectly because we were just talking about that. So yeah, the things added there in the duel scene too. Let's see, we have Alex saying same thing, gave it 4 out of 5 because of
I
him.
agree.
Yep,
I
same
think
exact boat.
4.5 stars, maybe, possibly 5 if it wasn't for those. That was the difference it made for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think those really ruined my enjoyment of the book at all, which is why I was still able to get it at 5 stars. But I can understand why it would like frustrate or kind of annoy some people. So I understand it giving it a 4.
Yeah, I mean, like, I still really enjoyed this book too. So like, I tried to make that clear in my review because I'm like, I'm gonna complain a lot about a lot of things, and I'm gonna dissect the reasons why I didn't like these things. But this was a great book. Like, I think it could have been, and even more like an amazing book, but like, it still works really well. I really, really enjoyed this, and I was not expecting. Like, I'd heard from a lot of people it was good, but I wasn't expecting to like love it as much as I still did, because any other book with the kind of problems this one has for me would have gone way down lower. But this was so good that it worked for the most part for me anyway.
See, that's why I like having these discussions because it's like I loved it so much. I was really blind to a lot of some of these issues, but now with the way you guys are talking about it, I can see why. Because you guys don't know, the author decided to discontinue this series for the time being, and now you can kind of see why. She was saying that like she had a lot of ideas, but I don't think she knew what to do with it, and basically it was just really difficult to continue this world in this series. And now I can kind of see why with the way you guys are having these problems. I bet she was trying to integrate some of these like different themes like technology and alternate worlds and like superhero mixed with like traditional like all this stuff. I guess I can see why she was like having such an issue, and she was just like, I guess I have to drop this for now.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
I would have still read some other things in that world.
I mean, yeah, she may go back to it. I think she's just right now, for the most part, leaving it for a while. I think she has to like kind of gain more skill. She has to probably like, write other stuff, and she'll come back to it. She's still a very early author. She's like my age. She's like 29.
Okay.
I definitely will be checking out other stuff that she writes here. I'm just gonna pop on the next thing because we've already been talking about specific scenes at this point, so I feel like that's a natural transition here. And we can always just go. I have one for just the general chat here too. But does anybody have any other like specific scenes they want to talk about? We've talked about a few so far.
I think for
My
me, a lot
favorite-
of it was the battle. Go on, Patrick. You've not to go.
My
for
favorite scene was after the battle when his younger brother, can't remember his name, starts with an H, Hiro something.
Hiroshi.
Yes. He says that he can't be gone yet because he hasn't caught up to him. And as a younger brother, that really hit me because that so much of growing up is catching up to your older brother and trying to beat him. That scene is the one that hit me the hardest.
Definitely understandable. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's so
I feel
many
like
scenes.
every way like people reacted, whether you're a father, a brother, or a mother, or a child, like I feel like everyone's reaction to like Mamoru's funeral scene, the way other people react to Mamoru, I feel like each one of us have like a different like, yeah, I related to the way that character reacted to Mamoru's death. I thought that was really awesome to see.
Definitely. There's definitely, you explore so many emotions and see so many different reactions, like you said, so you can definitely get that. And yeah, that was for me, it was like the scenes that are technically emotional scenes, I got hit harder later at like the reaction by characters to those scenes.
Yeah.
So we had Stacy brought up the duel, which definitely I really liked that
comes
scene.
up a lot.
I wouldn't say it was my favorite, but it was handled so well, and I think that could have easily been handled poorly. So I really liked the way that it was done, and their relationship in general, with Takeru.
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 these are all names I've guessed how to pronounce for the most part. So since I don't do audio, but yeah, I liked with them, and I know I think some of us chatted about this in Discord, but it it wasn't like him and Masaki just all of a sudden be like, oh, we do love each other after all, and everything's gonna be fine. It's like, no, we still have a lot of problems, but we're willing to work
Mhm.
together, and maybe that could happen down the line where we actually do feel some love for each other. And right now it's enough that we're on the same page and trying to move forward.
Well, I think what it did really well is it blended traditional like values with like them being like that was the point is their parents set them up. They're supposed to have this certain kind of family. He was supposed to protect them. She was supposed to love their children or raise their children. And so I feel like it blended a almost like a misogynistic point of view or lifestyle and with these traditional values and kind of made it more healthy whenever they had this duel. They sort of like came out of their more negative ways, and I feel like she blended that with them still being like, hey, now we're like on a level playing field. You understand that you need to step up as like a leader of this like place, and I need to do more than just like be a house mother. So I feel like they did a really good job that scene of not just going like, oh, now we're all lovey dovey, such a sweet moment. It just did a very practical like change in like their characters. Like what I liked about it is like I feel like everyone changed because they had to. It's like, hey, we can't survive or we can't rebuild our like country or our village if we don't change. And I feel like it was all just done like really well while still staying with like those traditional values.
Yeah, there were so many things like that. It just felt very, very organic, and that made the characters seem so much more real. And the way she captured all of that for sure, something I really enjoyed.
Dom,
Let's
what was
see
your
what we
favorite
got.
scene? I know you're ready to go.
We'll pop. Yeah, we can pop over to Tom if you still want to go. I was looking for the comments in the quiet part.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying for me, I mean, I like battle scenes anyway. Generally, it's they bring a lot of kind of the pace and the emotion for me. But I liked how creative these ones were, and so when we had especially kind of the few against the many on the mountain, and you've got all these really inventive ways of using the powers that they have. But one that really stands out for me is Misaki when she sort of turns around and she's set upon, and I forget what they're called, Fonyaku or something like that, without murdering the name, starts sucking the air out of her lungs. And I just thought, all of these different things that you can do with a wind power, and I'd never have thought of doing that, and that's really interesting. So I like how they use these different powers in the battle rather than just kind of what you would see as the normal, just making spears out of ice and throwing them at people, which was good. But literally sucking the breath out of somebody's lungs, I just thought that's pretty interesting. I was not expecting that at all.
Well, the blood thing too.
Yeah,
I thought was very interesting, the way that was brought up, and just all the different like levels and like subsets you could get with the powers.
yeah,
For
it's
sure.
very inventive.
Yeah, Dom, what I liked about the like the air sucking out of the thing is like 'cause I've definitely seen that before. I think I actually even put it in my book. But what I liked is the repercussions afterwards. Like she kept talking about like after Meimuru's death and after they're still recovering, like how much her chest like still hurt. I think that's what I really liked about it. It's like, okay, yeah, I've seen that move before. I do think it's really interesting and cool, but I liked how it didn't go right away. Like actually, I could like it felt so much real. She was just like her lungs still hurt. It's still hard for her to breathe. It's hard for her to like walk up a mountain and stuff like that. I thought that made it like so much better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you normally
imagine
get
that's
that,
gonna do some
someone's had an arrow in their arm or something, and they just, take it out, bandage it up, and they walk it off. But yeah, it was good to see that actually, no, this is something that has an impact, and it's not just going to quickly go away with a bit of power of mind or something.
So we had boiled jellyfish, chapter 20, which I think is one of the reaction scenes. I know chapter 17, that is the battle.
Yeah, 17 was the one that was called The End, which came up in the middle of the book. I thought, oh well, I've still got quite a way to go yet.
Yeah, just a bit, but
20
definitely
is the
on.
last time.
The last time.
Yeah, there were a lot of those. The other one I'll mention is the second to last chapter. Should have been the last chapter. There was a ton of falling action in this book, and I kept feeling like this is still falling, and it was still like good, and so it didn't bother me a ton. But obviously, when you have like the big event in the middle, there's gonna be a lot. But, like the last chapter, the way it ended, and I can't remember her name, but the woman who was attacked by one of the fun, yeah, I can't say the Wind people's
Yeah.
names. And then like it's talking about how she gives birth to the child from
Hiyori.
when she was attacked. Here, yeah.
Mhm.
And then just kind of the talk too about like how Misaki and the others were making sure that like the child wasn't mistreated and everything, and then the kind of the final thing with her too committing suicide, and it just like it was very sad, but like it was so well written, and it just kind of like was one more thread being tied up, and I got that, and I'm like that really felt like an ending to me too. It just was you could see where it was going, and it just still made you go there and feel it with it. So
Yeah, I was so compelled by that scene that now that you mention it, with Hioru and her daughter, now Kazeko, I think is what they called her, the Wind Child. I like it was just so small, but it like impacted me so much that like I had to draw like fan art of what she would look like when she grew older. It just like everything that happened with her, her struggling. 'Cause she lost everyone. She lost her child, which I thought was so horrible. That she lost her child, and then I felt bad for one of the younger brothers who played with that child. So like the way all that was integrated was really done well emotionally, even though it was tragic. She lost her child. She then lost her husband, and she. Just the fact that it really broke my heart. I think what hurt the most is that she felt that she failed them, like for some reason, when like she was the one that was defiled. I'm getting emotional now. It was so horrible that she felt that she did something wrong when she didn't,
And I
and then
love
the fact that when she had this child, and that it started controlling the air, and she knew it was not her husband's child, and she still couldn't kill the child. I was just like, oh my god, it was so sad.
and the scene where Misaki is telling her like this is still your child, even though like it's not your husband's child. This child is part of you, because that's something that she learned, Misaki, as well. Because in the beginning, she couldn't feel connection with her children because she saw them as like Takeru's child and not a part of her. And she learned that lesson, and then she was able to tell to her friend like this is still your child, and it's still gonna be part of you. I really like that scene.
Yeah, it was all really done well, and she was just this side character that was really unassuming, and I did like how they lead to her possibly being something in the future, and I just like attached onto that so well. I was just like, I would love to see more about what she was going to go through and how she grew up and like how strong she was going to be. So I thought that was really interesting.
yeah, there was definitely like so many of the other characters, even though they were smaller, that just had those really impactful scenes too. I thought that was a really interesting focus.
Mm-hmm.
So we got, oops, I clicked on that one. So Stacy mentioned the duel. She thought it was very cathartic. What's the other comment? I think that's all. I've been trying to keep pretty up to date on comments
Lawrence,
here.
did you do your favorite scene yet?
Well, it's probably the duel that I love the most. I think I just love how they don't talk so much. They're both like a super reserved person, but everything that was not said for like all their years of marriage was said in that scene with that duel. That's what I love about that scene. And then like a moment that I really like, it's not a scene, but just like a small moment. It's when Misaki is outside the dungeon and she's like seeing her Mamoru's fighting, and she wants to go in, but she can't because she's a woman, and she's just like really wanting to go in, but she's just like stuck in the door. That's the little moment that I really liked.
That was a really great moment of her like actually bonding with him and just coming in. He's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
Like, "Oh, I guess I'll take it easy on you," and all that. Yeah, there were so many of those just even smaller scenes that were really enjoyable. I felt like with the book.
Yeah, and honestly, now that you guys mention it, I feel like that might be like my favorite scene. So I was really trying to think. It's like obviously the battle's really cool. The duel is like done really well. but I just really love like the mother and son stuff, and I think that when he's struggling with knowing how to proceed with his life because his country is lying to him, and the way that she just wants to get up and go do something, and you finally see, because I feel like most of the book, and I can't possibly understand how a woman would feel in like that kind of environment, but the entire time I feel like we're yelling at Misaki to like do something, act like you were in this past scene, be bold or something, take a chance, and then when she finally does it, and she protects her son, and she's so scared that Mamoru is going to act like how he should, how his people have raised him to be, being very misogynistic or judge her, be scared of her, and he doesn't. He just thinks she's just so fucking cool. I just love that, and then he learns from her, and he becomes better because of it. And I just think like that's like so awesome. So I think I'll do that. I like the mother and son scene. I think that's what I was missing is after he dies, then we no longer get Misaki and Mamoru like bonding. There's so much potential for them to be so much better, to do so much more. It was just all gone.
Well, and I feel like it made it sadder because you see her start to like, for the first time, really feel like, she can have a relationship with her son, and they start bonding, and it's like right at that moment was when it's all ripped away, and it's just, the way that built up made it so much worse, and you get the feeling she's going to try a lot harder with her other children, but it's just that just adds to the kind of the tragedy of the story with that, I think. For sure.
Well, actually, speaking of trying harder with your children, I didn't realize. I guess it almost could go back to favorite characters. I struggle with this one, but Takeru actually got. I was amazed by how much I loved Takeru. Like by the end, like I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna love this like asshole." He was just so cold-hearted, and then by the end, the way he grew, and then as you're saying, like bonding with their children, the fact that he then started training Hiroshi to control his powers because Hiroshi is so much like his father. I love that. There was so much about Takeru that I ended up loving. He's a sleeper favorite character because I just couldn't believe that like she was able to turn him around for me.
But also, I feel like we don't like Takeru because we're only seeing him through Misaki's eyes. Like it's so frustrating because we're only seeing through her, and she's just like frustrated by him because they don't talk and they're not having like the loving relationship that she wanted. I think that's a big part of why we don't love him. Because the few chapters we got from his point of view, I really enjoyed them. We really got to know him more.
Yeah,
there's definitely more to him.
That way. I think the way that we only see that side of him, it's almost like he's specifically written for you not to like him, and then to have that turnaround at the end, which I agree, I thought was really good. Just being able to see kind of some of the reasons for it. I think the only kind of negative on that respect for me was that it was almost like opening the floodgates, and all of a sudden we've got this reason and kind of everything's almost okay afterwards, rather than it being a bit more kind of drawn out. But I suppose at that point we were near the end of the story, so there wasn't really the time for that anyway.
Well, yeah, and with that, that's where I felt we didn't really get, because that's honestly what I was expecting after the duel. I'm like, oh God, please don't do the whole thing where they fought a duel and now everything's just dandy. And it still kind of like wasn't, and there were still some issues. And you just like, it gave you kind of the feeling that maybe things can be built from here, but I didn't think it went and did something cheesy like everything will be happy forever now. Like they're still gonna have problems. They've still had a like really toxic marriage for like their entire marriage, and things aren't gonna just be better first thing tomorrow. But I thought, in the short amount of time that was left, I thought it was handled very well.
Well, that's why I think I liked Robin's chapter, as I know it's not a very good chapter for a lot of people, but the parts where it kind of made her realize that like she wasn't completely done with Robin. There was still some love there. I feel like a lot of us kind of have that, is like where we remember that youthful kind of love, and then but now this is like a stable, and this is like I think what we need now is this kind of love with Takeru, and then Takeru letting her have that opportunity to say goodbye or have closure with Robin because she never did. There's a lot in the Robin chapter that I still really liked because of how it resolved or how it kind of built upon their marriage.
Yeah. And Patrick, it looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, if we had gone Takeru's point of view instead of Misaki, I think a lot of people would have ended up hating Misaki When I had her backstory, and here's this mother that doesn't care for her kids and complains about being a noble's wife and having this life. She would have appeared really selfish from any other point of view except her own.
That is a really interesting point. Yeah, it definitely could have been so different, especially finding out because like neither one of them really were the best people in a lot of things. But yeah, if you look at it from Takeru and like the way he sees things too, yeah, definitely. And I think it's nice that you get kind of just a glimpse behind like how different would this have been.
Yeah.
We got kind of on that note, Stacy with changing the perspective on characters down the line, which is definitely good. Narsil agrees on the duel.
And going back to favorite scenes, this isn't one of my favorites, but I remember reading chapter 16 and I was going to go to bed afterwards and getting to I'm dead, he realized with a chilling clarity. I'm dead. Thinking, did both of my main characters just die and still have that much of the book left?
Yeah, that was a hard chapter to stop on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely
did not stop there.
I think
there
the
were
only
some
thing for me
points.
with that is I didn't kind of believe it 'cause, you know, all these books that you've read and characters die, but as you say, to have two main characters and to kill both of them off in the middle of the book, that's, I mean, killing one out of two is quite a big hit anyway, but to kill both of them, I think that's the only thing that almost let that down a little bit for me, is that I wasn't actually expecting for Misaki to be dead when I turned the page. So it was good, but it was, yeah, almost a little bit of a letdown there, just because I thought, well, you can't bring in another character or suddenly give us, I don't know, Takeru's point of view for the rest of the book. So, you know, what are we going to do here?
Would have been interesting, but yeah, that would have been rough.
I was hoping he was still somehow the one alive.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting, actually, that you guys mentioned it, is what I really liked about that scene is that it wasn't Takeru that saved her. Like, I knew that someone was going to save her. I was just like, and we already got her friend. Oh, I feel bad I don't remember her. Whoever her friend is, that was like the nice one, her like stepsister, her cousin or whatever.
Zuko or something like that.
Yeah.
I should have looked up a character list.
Yeah, I forgot her name.
I nearly did that because I knew I'd forget them all.
Yeah, I think so she already came in and got her ass knocked out, so she wasn't going to help. And I liked that it wasn't Takeru. I like by the end, I was like, okay, well, Takeru is obviously going to come in. We know he's coming up the mountain to do something. He's got to pop in at some point. And the fact that it was her son that saved him, and that was interesting. And I thought that was cool. It's like it was two sides. Like one, I thought it was interesting that her son did it. That had a lot of emotional impact. I like that it wasn't the cliche like, oh, Takeru saved his wife. But then when we learned why he didn't save her, because he was like stuck in his powers, I thought that was incredibly fascinating. So it's like, I just loved how they didn't make Takeru be like the guy that saved his wife, and I love the reason why he didn't save her.
Yeah, because you almost expect that because you saw him running off to save his family, and then, yeah, as you say, it's not him getting there. So I quite liked that, actually. Yeah, it just wasn't, oh, you know, this is just run-of-the-mill, husband comes in and saves the day kind of thing.
Yeah.
Setsuko.
Setsuko.
I literally looked up a character director.
At the back of the book, there is one, if you had a hard copy.
What's funny,
I don't have the hard copy.
A small part that just shows, like, you know, we talked about how, like, her lungs hurt for a couple of chapters. What I loved is that they really fucked up that kitchen. Like, when they broke that kitchen, that's like its own minor character for the rest of the book. She's like, oh, we're trying to rebuild the house, but we still ain't got no kitchen. That sink is still broken. We had to ice over the drain or whatever. I thought that was funny. That's like, yeah, they really messed up that kitchen.
Except the water, the taps kind of bugged me. So why have you not just frozen it then and stopped it? But it's like a chapter or so later on, they're saying the taps were still running or the kitchen still flooded. So
I think they eventually froze it.
Yeah. But they had other things on their mind, Dom.
Yeah,
it was a busy time.
They were bombed.
But it's
Going
oh man. Go ahead.
Something else that the last chapter I think did was pointing out to Misaki, hey, make sure you forgive him for killing that guy.
Oh, the
He's
kid.
a 5-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
think
like
it was
that.
Robin who said, "Did you forgive him for it?" He needs to know that it was okay that he did what he did.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just switch to the general chat because we're still kind of talking scenes, but I feel like we're drifting, and I figured that would happen anyway. So I'm just gonna leave the general here from now on, I think. But so anything we want to talk about scenes or any other characters. So it's been a really great conversation. It definitely sounds like we have a pretty wide spectrum. We agree on a lot of things, but everybody's had some different interpretations, which is always nice. Um, I'll ask. So I think Patrick and Dom, you're both parents.
No, I'm not.
Oh, is it just Dom? Okay. I thought I saw you comment about that, Patrick. So I'm sorry.
Oh, I
But
think I was making a joke on something that Alan said.
oh, that might have been. It's totally good. But yeah. So Dom, anything as a parent that hit you harder then? I guess this is just a you question now.
Do you know? No, not really. I when I'm reading, I'm quite detached. I think so. I don't kind of link it to my real life or anything like that. I mean, that's part of the reason I read fantasy is just to completely escape from my world. So I know, for instance, Narsil, he said that Mamoru hit him really hard because he really had an affinity to him because of his brother. But yeah, I don't get that for me reading, so not a problem.
Fair
But I
enough.
can see definitely how some people would, just not me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know. I had seen several people like in Discord or in other areas just comment about how some of the scenes, like as parents, hit them harder. But I'm the same way when I read, so I definitely get that. Like, I mean, I didn't cry reading this book. I don't think I've ever cried
Hmm.
reading a book. It's not because it's not sad. Like, I can recognize it. But I just don't usually go to that level either. So I can get that. But I was just curious because that's something I heard people mention. But
I have a question for you guys. What did you guys think of? I think it's Quan, his name, the kid in the beginning that like is telling me that they're being lied to. Because when we first meet him, I really thought he was going to be more important to the story. I thought there's going to be a friendship between him and Mamoru, and then we basically don't see him, and then we see him a little bit at the end. But I just was wondering what you guys thought about him.
I think it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually did think about him like just a couple minutes ago, but I wasn't going to bring it up because I was just like, he kind of just gets dropped after that. I mean,
I kind of liked him, but
yeah, I thought he was fine. I do think it's quite interesting, and I feel like it's realistic that he gets dropped after the halfway mark because we only see him because of Mamoru. So now that Mamoru is
Yeah.
gone, we're not really getting to interact with Quing as much. I mean, we do, him and his father, they kind of do their own part here and there. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I was kind of just like, I didn't know what to say about him after like the halfway mark. He realistically just gets like dropped off from us seeing a lot
Yeah.
of him.
yeah.
I thought that
Well,
was a shame, but as you say, it's kind of realistic because we only see him through Mamoru's perspective, or mostly see him through that. So it was probably right that he was left out. But for him and the I can't remember his name either, the blacksmith boy, you almost don't hear about them after Mamoru goes. So, but I thought they, as with a lot of the kind of side characters, I thought they were really interesting and well done. It wasn't like, any of the little characters were kind of neglected because they're not key characters to the story. So I quite liked that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that made too with having that storyline going on and having another character who got a lot of focus. It made it all the more where you're like, is he really dead halfway through? Because I had that moment too. I'm like, is he really like? Are they gonna find him? Okay, I'm like, no, he really is. But because I think they sent him to like go make the cell phone call or something, didn't they?
Yeah.
As in, he
Yeah.
did something, but he was just kind of like, go away. We're done with you for now.
Yeah, he had to go get reception or something.
yeah.
Which is a really funny problem to have in a fantasy world, but
Yeah.
they did get creative after building cell phone towers with finding a reason why they didn't work when they needed them. But here's Narsil. You heard us talking about him. So Mamoru, Yeah, he was just really attached to, so reiterating.
Yeah, I was different with Mamoru's death. If anything, I got annoyed by it purely because it was one of those moments that takes me away from it, because you've got this really, really emotive scene, even though I wasn't kind of as emotionally hit as some people were. But in the middle of it, you then get, 14 years later, I think it is, Hiroshi will be the youngest kid to succeed in creating the Whispering Blade. Actually, Mamoru beat him, but no one will ever know. And I'm thinking, well, I know Hiroshi survives then. I know that he's going to go on and be really powerful. And that kind of spoilt it and took me a little bit out of it, because that's in the future. I don't want to know about that. I want to know what's happening here and now. And, potentially have a little bit of fear. Is the family going to survive? Are any of them going to make it out? Well, no, Hiroshi does now.
Yeah. I'm on the fence with that one, and I'm curious to see if other people felt the same or really liked it, because I heard both reactions to that line, where people were like, "Oh, that's awesome," and people are like, "Eh." So, let anybody else have thoughts there?
Actually, I really liked it. I think that was one of my favorite parts. Is that just again, just him tying it back into like his siblings. It didn't really throw me off. I don't think I really expected everyone to die anyways. I don't think it took the stakes away from what else was going on for me either. I really liked that. I had no problem with it. Yeah, and what Stacy said is like I feel like that was one of the moments where like it also solidified that he was dead. There was no coming back. It wasn't like, oh, did he or did he not make it? Unlike with Masaki, it's like we knew he was dead, because this is basically like they kind of gave him like a eulogy essentially. And I just really liked. I thought that was interesting.
It's where I'm on the fence, because I feel like I agree it does take you a little bit out of it. But I still thought it was a good line. It felt like one of those lines where she's like, "Should I keep it? Should I take it out?" No, I like it. I'm gonna keep it in, because I think it works despite the issue. I think so. That's why I'm kind of half and half on it.
I think again, it just leads to what I was saying earlier, where it just shows his loss of potential. Like I think that's all. It didn't really take me out. It just made me hurt more, because I'm like, oh great, we knew how powerful he could be and the potential he had, and we're losing him like because of it. I think that's just all I was thinking over the time. I wasn't really like, oh, my brain did not go like outside of that scene and just that thought process.
Definitely. Does anybody else have any specific topics that they want to talk about?
Does anybody want to just like go right into the last chapter? Because we all talked about how we like liked and didn't like it, but I feel like we haven't actually specified what we didn't like about the end.
I didn't mind it. I mean, I don't think it necessarily fit. It didn't necessarily need to be there, but I wasn't against it. I preferred it over the flashback chapters, if I'm honest. But yeah, I can see why people wouldn't like it, but it didn't bother me too much. I was expecting to hate it from what everyone had said before I got to it, but it wasn't too bad.
See, I didn't hear that anybody even hated the last chapter. That's why when we started this chat, I didn't realize how many people didn't like the ending.
I had definitely heard it brought up where it was kind of like the infamous last chapter.
Yeah.
But
It's
for
too
me,
long, I think.
it's an
It is
epilogue.
really long.
It's a very long epilogue, and it having that be the last chapter is what I think really doesn't work, because it's not a part of the story. It's kind of like a look to see what's going to happen, what happened after later on, and what's going to happen. And it's the chapter before that ended on such like a beautifully tragic note that I just felt like that should have been the end. It was mostly just like I didn't. That was the thing, is despite my complaints, I really liked the book, and so it didn't like ruin anything for me. I just felt like it wasn't needed, and there were a couple of specific lines where it just became painfully obvious that it was just being used to spin off to the earlier books, basically. Where it's like, yeah, we've been up to this whole time, but there's this mysterious other stuff. Maybe this will be the plot of the next book, which granted was already out, but there were just a few things that were just a little on the nose for me that just made it like really like in your face that I'm trying to sell you another book with this.
And you
So
didn't
that's what it might be a bit.
And
And
then
did not make me want to go read the other books either, because I didn't really like Daniel in that chapter, so I didn't really want to go read the other books more because of that chapter. So
And that's a
that's why I
great
feel like
too.
necessary.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have no desire to read the other books at all because they're going to be basically focusing on the aspects I didn't like about Kaigen. I feel like it'll make me like almost like Kaigen less. Like I like to think of Kaigen the way it is, and I really, really enjoyed it, but I don't think the other books are going to be for me, just based on the fact that I didn't enjoy those aspects. So
Mhm.
I would love to read whatever the author writes next, but I don't think I'll go back and read those. What's everybody else's thoughts on those?
when I read the last chapter, I was really looking forward to the next book, and then I found out, oh, this is the prequel, and the next books don't even follow the same main character.
Hmm.
So at that, it's like, well, I don't really care.
Well, I know the second one brings in all of her children, so we do. It's technically their sequel. I don't know how much they're seen in it though. But yeah, I know the second book has Hiroshi and all the other little I forgot their last name, but yeah, it has like their whole has all of them. It even says that like that's when Mamoru was actually first mentioned is in like book 2 of it. So, but I'll check it out eventually, and I'll let you guys know if it's worth it or not. I don't.
Oh,
It's not high
definitely
on my
do.
list, but I know I'm not excited about book 1. 'Cause I think book 1 is only has Daniel and Robin and like this new character, and it's like Our Earth or something. I don't know. It sounds fucking crazy. I don't know how much I'll like it, but I'll give it a try. But I know the second one is supposed to bring in all the kids we know from this book, so we'll see.
Gotcha. Yeah, if you do, let us know because it sounds like you're the only one planning on reading them out of the group.
I'd take a direct follow up to this, in the same world, and even with some of the technology, I can overlook that if it's going to have that kind of writing and all of that. But to continue with these characters and directly follow it up, I'd take that. But the young adult series, yeah, I did have a look at it, and I don't generally read YA anyway, but it didn't suit my taste at all.
Right. That's the other part of that. Stylish wise, it's not the same writing format. What this
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't imagine it's
Why
gonna be like
cannot-
similar at all.
they're two completely different audiences.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that too is like whenever I'm done with book 2, if it's like I know there's no book 3. What Alex said in the chat, she would continue if he or she actually. I'm sorry. There's a man and a woman in your picture. I don't know if you're he or she, but they would have given other books a try if discontinued this series. And yeah, I'm kind of the same way. It's like hopefully the book 2 doesn't end on like a major cliffhanger to where I'm like really bent out of shape. But I mean, if you're expecting it going in, then you can like curb your expectations.
Alex is on the right, I'm pretty sure, by the way.
Okay.
You'd know that if you read Wheel of Time. You'd know what Stye means, Walker. But,
Sorry.
That's all good.
Are you book shaming me on a completely irrelevant chat?
I see. I commented we have to randomly talk about another series at some point, but
Well,
yeah, it does
speaking
sound
of-
like Narcel's planning on
Speaking of
reading
giving
that.
people stuff or going against other people, I don't 100% agree with you, Nico, that I feel like the last chapter was completely irrelevant or completely an epilogue because, like we said, we talked about how Robin told her like to forgive her child, and that's a resolution. I mean, technically she doesn't resolve it, but you can assume that she's going to then patch things up with Hiroshi. So it's like that's a resolution for this book. We know that she accepts Takaru and what they mean to each other, and that they have a potential for love. I feel again that's a resolution in this book. So it's like it doesn't. I think she did enough that it didn't completely just feel like an epilogue and like oh all of this is completely unnecessary. She did still like wrap or conclude some things in the final chapter that were relevant to Sword of Kaigen.
Oh, that's definitely fair. Yeah, there were some things in there. It just yeah, it was kind of mixed, and that's why, like I said, I didn't absolutely hate the last chapter. I just like I kept feeling like I'd get to these chapters where I feel like, oh, this feels like an ending, and then we keep going, and then like, oh, this one definitely, and then we keep, and so it was just kind of a different experience. There were just a lot of like false endings, and most of them were used to wrap things up really nicely in a really satisfying way. But it's it's one of those things where it's just kind of like at some point I just found myself being like, does this book end? If I just keep reading on my Kindle, am I going to be scrolling forever? And so that's where more, like I said, I didn't hate the last chapter. It's just we have to have this like massively long chapter where so much of it is trying to set other stuff up. I'm just like, okay, come on. I just read half a book of the falling action, and then you're going to give me that. It just, that was one of the things that I wasn't a huge fan of. But it did have those elements. That's where, even with that, I agree, there were some positive things that still worked.
I think what else I kind of liked about the last chapter, yes, I'm a she. Well, you have a very, I'm not even gonna say that. I was gonna say you look at make a very cute couple with that person, but then that could be her brother or something. Who knows what's gonna go from there? It's a very nice picture, regardless. But I feel like what I liked about the last chapter is, and this I can see why people wouldn't like it, but I kind of like how it sort of, I feel like it made the world feel really natural and big and alive, because we kind of get like just quick mentions like, oh yeah, well, we hopped to this place and we were here for a while, and you remember our friend from there, well, he has a husband now and they're doing great, and he's like, stop messaging me, you fools, or something like that. And just like, I kind of like when it can be done well, where I feel like, and it was done well, where they talk about things that aren't really relevant to our story, but it makes the whole world feel alive. And like I said, it kind of seems like where we get some conclusion to our current story, while also she's kind of like, and if you're interested, the story does continue over here. It's like, like Masaki doesn't live in this like tiny little globe where everything revolves around her people. It's like, we were doing this stuff over here, and these people were fighting like these people. And it's just like, I kind of like those small moments where you kind of realize that this world is very big and that these people like weren't alone. So I think since I just enjoyed the book overall, when I got to the end, this stuff that like didn't seem relevant, I thought was still really interesting to me. Yes, there we go. 2 assumptions correct.
I had to pop that up, not to ruin what you were saying. I just saw it pop in. So, but yeah, well, and that's what I guess. I think everybody here enjoyed the book, but we all had things that we reacted to differently, both positively and negatively. And so it's nice that even though like there are some things that are a bit divisive, we're all still like, yeah, but it was really good, even if some of us liked or didn't like certain parts. So I think that tells you how good of a book it is. The fact that even with everything we mentioned, like nobody's been like, I didn't like this. And I don't think I really heard anybody say they straight up didn't like it. Some people had more problems than others, but at least not that I remember in the Discord. So
in my discussion, some people didn't like it because it was too sad. I think that's
Well,
where I think
okay.
also Elsa didn't like it because she said it was too sad for her, and that's why she didn't like it. But
I mean, if it's so sad that you don't like it, I feel like you liked it by default. For it to make you feel that, yeah. So I can get like, I don't want to read something this sad, but
yeah, I'd be curious if someone like just didn't like how like they're like, oh, I just don't like this character because this is just set up badly, or something like that. It's like, yeah, I wonder if like I didn't really read too many like negative reviews, and like Nico, you've been saying in Discord, like everybody's just been saying like positive things about it. So
yeah,
and for how much the book is hype as well, people still love it. So that's something as well.
That's why I went in with no expectations, because I've been burned way too many times from everybody like, this book is amazing, and I read it and I'm like, that was mediocre to me. And so like I really didn't want to like get myself like too hyped up for it. So I went in with no expectations. It also probably helped that I really didn't like the book I read right before it. So like it could have been not great. I still would have liked it more. But it's just, yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised that I completely get the hype. And despite any problems I had, I really enjoyed it. And it's definitely, I will be getting a physical copy at some point. So
I hope they kind of release better versions. Like mine, like just reading it, mine's like already like messed up. Like the spine like had to break, and it's not the best quality.
Lawrence and I were talking, and she said hers was fine, but that she'd heard that.
I did hear about pages falling out and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. But
mine's fine. It was kind of opened a little bit. It had a kind of a lip when I got it, but that's completely gone now after I've read it for a little bit.
Yeah, and speaking of Nico, of reading bad books at the time you were reading Sword of Kaigen, you don't want to know what I was reading that made this one feel so much better.
I think I could guess, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, I didn't have any page. Narsil said he had pages falling out. I didn't have any of that. It's just I just feel like it just bent so easy. Just like the shape of this book, like reading it comfortably, it was hard not to like break the spine. But it still looks
Yeah.
okay. At first glance, it looks okay.
Appealing to different kind of readers. Yeah,
Mhm.
I
The
agree.
other thing is the table of contents is not accurate at all.
No,
Oh, really?
If you look at the page for where chapters begin,
I think it's funny that
I
people
think I remember
still
seeing that too,
have
then.
table of contents. I
Yeah.
never. I don't know why you need it unless it was like an educational book or something.
Like
or
a
if you're
Scooby.
doing a review and you remember something from chapter 17 and you need to get back
Yeah.
to chapter 17.
Yeah. Well, I like
So
chapter
pointed out,
titles.
it's like, yeah, you're right. Because I never pay attention to the chapters at all. But yeah, they're like a good 5 or 10 pages out towards the end of the book.
For me, like I used to, like if I'm reading, like a really long book with like different sections, I'll be like, okay, let me flip back to the table of contents, see how long till I get to this section or things like that. Oh, we have Nurse will blame Stacy for convincing him to read it.
I'm glad we did this because I've been wanting to read this book for a while. See, like Nico, like you, like well, actually, opposite of you. I still had high expectations, but it was one of those books where everything I heard about it, I thought it was, oh yeah, those type of contents was real messed up. But yeah, it's like everything about it I knew would work. It's like usually I really like character driven books. If they're really emotional, I usually like emotional books, and I usually like East Asian like inspiration books. So it's like all of that. It's just like, and since everybody loved it, I was really just like, I don't see how I couldn't love it. Like I think it like didn't like exceed my expectations. It just like met them, and I was just like, yep, this is exactly what I expected, and like not in like a bad way. It was kind of like a unique book. So I definitely understand what you mean, Nico, about like just being really burnt by books. But some books are really hyped up, and you're just like maybe something like The Faithful and the Fallen, where everybody loves them and they're really hyped up, but there isn't really too much about why it was so good. It's kind of really generic, like, or general phrases like, oh, I really like this book, oh, the characters are great and stuff like that. And it's like you get to it and there's just so much that could go wrong with it. But I feel like everything you heard about this book, it's like it was hard to stray from what you've heard, really.
Yeah, it does definitely depend because that's like I'm still not finished yet with the Dragonbone chair, and I was generally assuming that I was really, really gonna like that book from everything I'd ever heard about it, which was quite a bit. And so like I tried not to go in with like weird expectations, but I generally assumed it was gonna be a really perfect kind of book for me, with the style that I enjoy. So I can get that. That does definitely make sense. This one I really feel like, despite how popular it was, I just didn't know a ton about it before starting. And there
Yeah.
were a lot of things I did not realize were going to be the way they were. So it was a really nice surprise for me.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
thought it was
exactly
gonna be like a mother, like deciding to join the army to fight for her
Like,
people. Then I get to, I'm like, oh no, it's just one battle, and the mother doesn't really join any kind of army. She fights, but it's just like, and then like we talked about the technology and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just like the plot expectations were so wrong when I read this. I was like, oh, I did not understand what I was getting into at all.
Yeah. And also as well as her joining up the army, I thought she was going to be going off on a quest to find the sword of Kaigen. So that
oh, okay, that makes sense.
I think
so
that was the one.
sword of Shannara or something like that.
That was the one thing I knew, was that the sword of Kaigen was a place as opposed
had
to
no
like
idea.
the Ember Blade.
That I knew too.
So okay then, yeah.
Yeah, I think the closest thing I had, I thought it was going to be like about a mother and then her son who like went off to war, and like the whole book is like him experiencing the war and her experiencing dealing with him being away at war and like the worry, which sounds like a much less interesting book than what we got. So like I'm glad that it was the way that it was, but I love too all the little things. Like yeah, I absolutely thought it was a specific sword, and then when it mentioned that, remember we are the sword of Kaigen, and I'm like, oh no, it's like the land mat. Oh, okay. And like there was the like the metaphor that they like protect, but yeah, I
I also
absolutely
didn't,
thought it was going to be a sword.
I also didn't think that I feel like no one really talked that much about the powers. Like I thought the
That's not-
elements sounded like random. Like it was going to be like one or two people that had this special ability to fight. And I'm like, nah, there's a lot of people that have like ice powers and wind powers and fire powers. I was just like, I just didn't realize how prevalent the powers were going to be like in this book because just like nobody talked about them.
Yeah, that's and like I think I'd heard you specifically, Walker, mention it that they were gonna that some of the stuff about the elemental powers, but I hadn't heard a ton about that either. And yeah, I also would not have expected it to be like, oh, all these different races are physiologically different, and that's why they have these powers. And but you get a little bit more detail with it too. And like I liked the fact that like the people who manipulate water and ice literally have like colder body temperatures. Like the people who work with fire literally have a higher body temperature. And like there are these actual like physiological differences, and it wasn't something that was like super dug into, but there was definitely enough there that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I think even in my review, I definitely mentioned the powers because it's exactly how I like to use elemental powers. It's how I use them in my own book. And yeah, I thought it was so interesting. I loved how the water people they could sense based on like body heat because of their water powers, and the air people based on like sound or breathing because of air. Yeah, there was a lot that they put into the elemental power, and I just was so surprised that like nobody talked about it. I loved how it wasn't just like yeah, I throw an ice shard and like that's it. There was so much like depth into not like how like as you said like it affects them like physically, how like they interact with the world. Like Mamoru towards the end before he dies when he realizes he's like part of it. Like also was that clear that like the what Mamoru happens at the end is the same thing that his dad does? It's like he like completely becomes part of the mountain or something like that,
And
and
that's like the
everything around
secret
it.
to the Whispering Blade. Yeah, is like becoming one.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
And I like
just so
each
much about
family
it.
has like each family has a different power, like a different special thing. I really like that as well.
Yeah, that was done in such a fun way because what it reminded me of immediately is like old kung fu movies where like the different masters have the different, special move or like Kung Fu Hustle or something where there's the different specialties. And it was done in a very serious and interesting way. So I liked taking that kind of familiar thing that's usually used as somewhat for humor in a lot of things and then making a really serious thing too. It just, yeah, there were a lot of interesting things done with the magic.
I like that, except for the blood part and the taboo around manipulating people's blood. Okay, if you all have all these special techniques that only your family can do, what's wrong with anyone learning this other technique?
I think that
I
was
didn't really get
partially they were like afraid that they'd use it to control other people. And that was the very last chapter. They made that seem like that is possible. That you can like use somebody's blood to make them a puppet, basically.
Yeah.
But until then, no one thought that was possible.
Yeah, so it is kind of weird that it's one of those things. I don't know, but I was assuming that that's featured heavily in one of the other books.
Well, they also
The way it was brought up.
They briefly brought it up that blood kind of seems like tainted version of water powers because even at one point Masaki says that like when she's covered in blood she like feels or tastes this like copper or whatever like iron in the blood, and she even mentally thinks, oh, this is why people think that. It's sort of just like I feel like it's anytime you see like vampire, like I was just watching a vampire movie last night with my mom, and every time she drank blood she was just so like grossed out by it, and it's just like that visceral reaction to what blood kind of means to people. I feel like that's why they don't like blood magic. It's like it's just like it's a tainted form of like controlling or using this form of water. It just doesn't feel right. It like kind of feels like gross or
I can
something.
see
I think
that.
that's what they're
Right.
kind of trying to like get across.
Yes, but even like the main use in it throughout this book was like scabbing over wounds.
Yeah.
If you're a warrior nation, wouldn't you want to be able to
It'd be
treat
pretty
stab wounds?
useful.
Does seem like that'd be pretty practical. Very
I think
fair
maybe
point.
they did just see this is useful, but there is also this other application, and we're a bit scared. You don't know who's going to take it to that next level and take it too far, basically. So if we outlaw it and we say that it's tainted or whatever it is, it kind of takes away that temptation for people to use it to try to make a puppet of people.
Well, also, I don't necessarily think it was like a nation thing because Masaki's family does do blood stuff, and like no one really looks down on them. It's more so like Takeru's family, because he even says with him mixing with the blood, it's tainting the Whispering Blade, and the Whispering Blade is like the end all be all for their clan. So if you're messing with blood magic, then it messes up your Whispering Blade, and that's what we're supposed to be. So it's like I don't think everyone disliked blood magic. I think it was just really difficult to do, and Masaki's clan was good at it, and then Takeru's clan didn't like it because it made their abilities less pure and harder to do. I don't think it was like a countrywide thing where like, oh, you can't do this. At least that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, I definitely think that was an area that it wasn't particularly clear. It was brought up and it was relevant a few times, but that was not one of the areas I felt like was really explored, like some of the others were. So let's see, we've been going for about an hour 15. It's pretty good. So I figured we'd at least be an hour, and a lot of good discussion. Does anybody have any final type thoughts or other things you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I guess one more thought would be, did anyone else have a problem with the whole premise that this other country is attacking us and they're going to decide to attack the strongest part of us?
It was a bit weird.
I can't believe I forgot to talk about that, actually.
I can
Anybody
see
else
why
can
they
go
would do it, but yeah, it was a bit weird.
That was my other big problem. Because just the fact too that like the premise I thought was believable, that we're in this like backwater area that's extremely traditional. They still focus more on magic than technology. But we also know that most of the rest of the country does not. And like there are cities, there are technology, there's planes, there's satellites, computers, all of that technology. But this other country that presumably also has this technology, they attack the strong magic users using their own magic users. Like, why didn't they just bomb to begin with? And it is explained a little bit where basically it's that they wanted to test themselves against the strongest and see if they could wipe them out completely, to see if it was worth it basically going to war again and see if they succeeded. But yeah, it did seem like a really, really poor military decision to me. So that was my other issue. I felt like the fact that there is technology, and even though it's brought up, because I think Masaki even says like, why didn't they just do a bomb or like poison or something? I just feel like you could have wiped out the magic users very easily using technology and then just killed everyone else probably. So
I mean, I thought it was fine. I didn't really have an issue with it. I mean, it was kind of just like it's just like how they said is, these people the last time they fought, is everyone kind of thought they were trash because they were like separate. Like they separated from, I can't remember the place that it's called, but like they used to be part of the Kai. I guess it's just Kaigen. Yeah, they used to be part of Kaigen, and they separated, and then like they were seen as like not very good at using their powers. So I think that they like wanted to test that. Plus, they didn't 100% make it clear if they did have the technology. Because if you remember, the people that had technology wasn't Kaigen, and it wasn't the air people. It was like Yamana or something like that. It was a completely different. I feel like it was basically like America. It was like the America of the book, who was related to Kaigen. They were like partners or whatever. So it's like they're the ones that seem to have all the technology. They didn't really make it clear that Kaigen had the technology or like the air users did. So I feel like the air users were just trying to see if they were strong enough to use air attacks. And also I think it was kind of just like, again, a sort of political thing. It was to make Kaigen realize that they were going to lose. Plus, I think they still want Kaigen to be part of their country because, again, they like seceded. So I just feel
well,
like
yeah, it was like because it was the Ranganese, they attacked and ended up taking over part of the Kaiganese Empire. But I took it as all of the stuff about them being like bad at their powers was all just propaganda, is how I took it, and that
it was a
wasn't
little
the
bit of
case.
it was a little bit of both. I think that Masaki talks about how they've had plenty of time to practice or something like that. They're not naturally bad. They just didn't have, because like all the ice people, they have like many generations of strong users, and I don't think the Raiganese had any of that. But now they've had time to be stronger, and like this is kind of like what they had.
Yeah, I just feel like in a world where we're literally at like the age where we have satellites and planes, and even if it's not like completely done, and I can buy it to an extent that magic does change the way technology is developed, because even like the planes, you know, they weren't made of metal, they were made of like the obsidian glass type stuff. But I just really thought it was odd to the extent that technology was not used in battle. It looks like we lost Lawrence.
Yeah. Also, Stacy like literally said something that basically is going right off of what you said. If you want to highlight that.
Oh, here we go. So financial considerations. As a government, if you had to go into a ton of debt and access tech. Well, yeah, that's a fair point. Oh, and it looks like her internet went out, so we'll hopefully see her back here shortly.
But Dom, what did you think about that? Do you have any opinions about that?
About the other nation attack.
Yeah, the choice to fight, the choice to attack the strongest people.
I didn't really think too much of it. I didn't like overthink it or anything like that. As I said, I felt maybe it sounded a little bit strange, but I just kind of brushed over it, if I'm honest, and just let it be as it was. But I can see kind of why it would make sense. As Nico said, it's maybe not what I would have thought is the greatest of military decisions, but they kind of gave a reason for it. So, yeah. But yeah, I just kind of brushed over it, to be honest.
Gotcha. All you missed, Lawrence, we were just kind of still talking about the same thing with the Ranganese attacking.
Mm-hmm.
That part's still here. So, but yeah, that was I'm glad you brought that up, Patrick, because that was an area I talked a lot about in my review too, because it was just an area that kind of rubbed me weird, and it's so much of that. There were things that like I half buy the explanation, and the other half of me like wants to analyze it into the ground and way too much probably. So
yeah, it was just a bit convenient. You know, it's a plot convenience, really.
Yeah, and sometimes you just gotta look over some stuff like that. So it's definitely fair.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any final thoughts or final topics?
On that same thought, since like the government is trying so hard to brainwash them, why would they just let some foreigner just come into the village? Like, you know how Quan comes in the village at the beginning, he's questioning everything, and he's saying how the history teacher is like telling them lie. If the government is really trying to brainwash them, wouldn't they like not let some foreigner come in the village? I thought that was a little weird.
Yeah, that was definitely something I thought about too, and I was trying to think, because it's definitely like, you know, the controlling media state where they do the propaganda. And so it didn't seem like it was like, you know, full blown like North Korea level or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this was more like current day China is how I looked at it, with, you know, not like completely locked down, but maybe even a little bit less extreme, but like very much like state run media and like you do what you're told. I don't know if that's a perfect metaphor. It's not either one that I'm like crazy into, but that's kind of how I looked at it. But yeah, I agree. It seems odd that they just let some kid come in and be like, yeah, this is all lies. But
they might have also thought, he's just a kid. What damage could he do?
Yeah.
Could be. And his dad did have like a legitimate reason to be there too. But you got the feeling it's this backwater they like to ignore. Oh, go ahead, Patrick. Sorry.
I was going to say he might have had a talking to with the government beforehand.
Yeah.
That's what I thought maybe would happen.
Could be. For sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they just like one of you guys said. I don't think they expected him to like go in there and change a whole country or anything like that. He really just changed one kid's mind, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense. Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah.
Get beat up to change that kid's mind.
That is fair. It didn't go particularly well at first. Oh man. Well, this has been a great conversation. So definitely thank you everybody for joining. I look forward to doing some more of these live streams to talk about the buddy reads, but I knew this one would be a good one just because so many people talked so much in the Discord and had a lot of thoughts. So appreciate everybody showing up, especially Dom. I know it's really late for you, your time. So Thanks for
Yeah,
making
past
it
my
over.
bedtime.
Yeah. So I think this is about we can go ahead and wrap this up. So
Thank you
everyone's
for
still
hosting.
watching. We've had, I think, pretty steady. Like there have been people who've been here for pretty much the whole time, and we had some pop in later. But yeah, thanks for coming by to watch. So we appreciate you.
Thanks for the good
Thanks,
discussion,
everyone.
guys.
Thanks, Nico, for hosting
you.
us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.